Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and dungeon mastering and your physical location with dungeon mastering. And one of the things I recently found out about, running a Dungeons and Dragons game in an FLGS, kind of interesting. I'm curious, and I'm of course very curious of where you guys have landed with this. So I've been very fortunate. I'm very fortunate. I have a house, and I can run Dungeons and Dragons at my house. But my current game is being run at a friendly local game shop. And the reason my game is run at a friendly local game shop is the player that I started a one-on-one game, and it quickly blossomed into a 5-player game, right? And that's been going well. And we just ran our 6th session at the FLGS, right? But something very unusual happened. So I ran my own game in my own house for 2.5 years. That was the campaign that came before then, and I've done a mix, over since 1982 in a whole bunch of different places since then. But it's been very interesting, the difference between a home game and specifically a friendly local game shop game. Very interesting what the difference is. So one, and I'm really on the fence with this, but I'll explain this one situation. So one of the things that happened that I did not, that turned out to be a little bit of a problem, we've been able to manage it since, but it happened in session 5, and I addressed it in session 6, and it was not a problem. Actually, I had to ramp it down in session 6. So essentially what happened was, it's an Eberron game, and two of the players are house aligned, and 2 of the players are aligned with the Grove of the Guardian, which is the Elden Reach, which is also the Towering Woods. It's this very nature-based organization with the Warden of the Woods, these druids, these shifter farmers, and they're the exact opposite of the houses. The houses are very powerful, very plotting, gold, that kind of thing. Whereas, the Elden Reach, this group is very, it's like the difference between elves and dwarves, right? Like dwarves build things, they collect gold, and elves are very much, trying to commune with nature, not as money oriented, that kind of thing, right? So the player characters really came at each other, in a very natural way, right? And what ended up happening was the house player was actually being essentially exiled out of the Grove of the Guardian, and he essentially was being pushed out and was in a very sound verbal argument with the other player character, and the player actually raised his voice in the FLGS, right? And it completely, and I know for a fact that I'd already seen this happen in my home game. And in my home game, when we would play, we would take the kitchen table and people would go into the kitchen, but my kids would play, video games they would just use headphones and play video games in the living room. They'd be upstairs. And so when somebody raised their voice in my house, it was not a problem, right? Like, and it was only for 1 or 2 lines. People wouldn't go on into shouting matches. Although I was really shocked. Like, the player was really getting into their player character. They were role playing, right? Like, and this is that sharp edge where, where Dungeons and Dragons hits the IRL, and you're like, and honestly, if you look at, at Mercer's game, they're very boisterous, very, vibrant, in their playing style, right? But they've built a space for it. They literally have a studio for it, right? So what was really interesting was I had made a situation where somebody's yelling in the friendly local game shop, and now you've taken the friendly out of you've literally taken the FL, and now it's a local game shop. And literally in the same shop a week before, a woman came in and was like, "Hey, I'm looking for an expansion to Catan," right? Like, like the most muggle, request, right? If she comes in and somebody's, shouting about, a battle between Ondair and Breland, right? It's going to be unsettling, right? And so it's taking that friendly out, right? So one, at the end of the night, I just went up to the shop keep, right? Not the shop owner, right? And actually, I'm very blessed where we're at. The shop owner is like 3 stores away, owns like 4 or 5 stores in our local area, and so it's always just a shop keep. But I said, hey, one of my players, kind of lost, got lost in the game a little bit tonight. I'm sorry, there was a raised voice. And he's like, no problem. And it didn't seem like he was that disturbed. And the reason why is I've been to some very boisterous tournaments, right? And people can raise their voice when they win or lose at the games that are played there are Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and other games, right? So sometimes players will just get up to shenanigans, and so I've heard other people raise their voice, but not just like maybe discussing a video they watched or something. So it was very different, but it really caught me off guard. And then this week I actually said to the players, so the one player, same player, started to get into just speaking in the voice of his character, and he's a noble, right? And he's a fighter type, and so the voice would go, high, it would rise in volume on the things he was saying, and I was like, let's remember to keep the friendly local game shop, and he immediately went right down. It was not an issue, but it was, people were getting lost in their characters, which is exactly what I want. And at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, this is a little bit frustrating, because if this was in my home, they could have these moments of exuberance, right? Whereas, so now I'm kind of on the fence, right? And I could move it back into my house, but there's a lot of advantages to this current such situation. So what are the advantages? Well, one thing that's really nice is this Dungeons and Dragons game is happening. I am at the shop. I leave my home at 7 p.m. I'm at the shop by 7:20, right? I have 10 minutes of setup. I'm running at 7:40, and we are wrapped no later than 9:40, right? So the game rolls 1 hour and 50 to 2 hours long, and I'm filling the table. We have 4 to 5 players every week, which is really exciting. I really like it. It's getting me connected to other players, which is fantastic, right? So, and the other thing I really like too is people will come back and say hi to my players, right? And every week I'm buying $10 to $20 worth of stuff at least, and actually I spent $30 tonight. I always spend at least 10, right? And I have started ordering my Magic the Gathering, which I use for Dungeons and Dragons, at the shop, which actually has worked out fantastic. It's given me more options than I would have gotten through Amazon, and has definitely given me better service than I got with it. So I recently tried to buy the Magic Gathering starter set through Amazon, had to cancel the order, and was able to buy on the shelf the exact same item. So I'm actually supporting my FLGS. So it's tricky, right? So my players have to be more reserved and have to tamp themselves down, but we're playing publicly, and that's everything I love. I really want Dungeons and Dragons to grow, and so when people come in, when there's some muggle coming in and asking for Catan, and they look back and they see an entire table filled with Legos and dice, and the entire table full, right, because people are showing, right, that's everything I want for Dungeons and Dragons, right? So I think it's best if we stay at the FLGS. One thing I was incredibly blessed, I actually had someone actually offer for us to move the game to their house and to run it there. And the reason I turned that down was that actually would not be helpful to the player who I started with, who actually lives literally a couple blocks, and so it would have been farther out of their way. So I think it's best to keep it at the FLGS. I'm curious what you think, though. Do you think allowing my players to actually fully get immersed in their table, in their character, and not have to tamp down their exuberance, tamp down their joy, is worth all the benefits I'm getting from keeping this on a weeknight in a 2-hour slot? I still have, I have my weekends much more open, which time is a serious, stress point for me. Like being able to do Dungeons and Dragons on. And it doesn't push my family out of the dining room for an entire night is really nice. It's nice, right? And so I'd really love to hear what you think. Should I bring it back into the house, allow my players the full exuberance, or keep this public demonstration of what Dungeons and Dragons is, and understand that that's worth, my players having to lower their voices at times. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.